Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics, brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the cartoonist of comics like Shadow Eyes, Wet Moon, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and the upcoming Supergirl at DC Comics. It's Sophie Campbell. Thanks for coming on, Sophie.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So we are recording this on Monday, April 21st. How's the day been for you?
It's been good. I just got off a writer summit.
Ooh.
Call, so like I'm still in like my on mode. You caught me at a good time.
Like a DC writer summit?
No, for Ninja Turtle stuff.
Oh, okay.
Maybe that's secret and I shouldn't have said. Whatever. It's fine.
So was this just on Zoom and everyone's just chatting up about what's coming up?
Yeah. It was on Google Meet and, about one specific project, and they're just yapping away, and then I'm just like, I gotta go, you guys, bye.
Do you like the planning stuff, being part of an overall planning for things like that?
Yes and no. Like, I like batting ideas around with people and like hearing what other people's ideas are and stuff, but at the same time, like it's hard for me to be on for that long, and I just I start like just kind of losing steam and stuff, in those kind of environments.
How long was it?
It was like an hour.
Oh, okay.
I have another one on Friday that's supposed to be like 2 hours though.
Oh geez.
Oh my god.
I remember one time I had a guest. It was actually John Paul Leone, and he came on the podcast, and he listens to a bunch of podcasts I hadn't listened to, or he listened to. He listened to like Hardcore History and like these podcasts that would go on for like 3+ hours. And after we finished the interview, he was like, "We can keep going." We'd gone for like an hour and a half, and I was like, "John, I don't have any more in me. I'm like an hour to hour and a half tops podcast type of guy." Sometimes it's like when you're in that headspace, it's exhausting.
Yeah, it is. It's, like I've done conversations with people like on podcasts that have gone for like 3 hours or something, but it's like, I'll start like, losing my voice and stuff after a while. And, I was like legit kind of worried. I was like, oh my God, I have this interview with David, like right after this thing. Like, am I going to be able to talk?
This is why when I go to cons, I actually go to sleep early, because if I stay out too late and like go to like the bars and stuff when everybody's out and you have to yell, you're going to like lose your voice. And I'm like, my voice is my moneymaker. I got to keep this thing.
Yes. That would happen to me at conventions too. Like I would just have, laryngitis by the end of the
Well, we're going to get into your work on Supergirl here in a little bit. But for first-time guests, I mentioned before we started recording that I like to kind of go back to the beginning to get a sense of what your comic journey has been like, because I imagine all of that kind of shapes how, the creator you've become today. So let's start with your comic origin story. Where did everything start for you as like a reader, as an artist? Where did it all begin?
I mean, the stuff that got me into comics when I was a kid were Calvin and Hobbes, and the old Eastman and Laird Ninja Turtles comics.
Nice.
The old Mirage stuff. And those are the two big ones that, got me like drawing my own comics and like reading comics. And I feel like I didn't really like, I went to school for comics, which like sounds really stupid, but I did. And
SCAD, right?
Yeah, SCAD. And I feel like I didn't really take it seriously until like my senior year of college, where I was kind of just like, oh my God, like I don't know how to do anything. And like, I'm about to graduate. Like, what am I going to do? Like, I guess I better like figure this comics thing out. And then like, I actually, I kind of like, I realized that I didn't really know how to draw, I guess. Like, why didn't I pay attention in like life drawing class? And so I just kind of like buckled down in like, the last like 8 months of senior year of college, and just kind of decided that I was going to be serious about this comics thing finally. And, I was pounding the pavement, going to conventions and, lugging my portfolio around and stuff. And Jamie Rich was the first person to like basically give me the time of day back in like 2002 or 2001 or something like that. And then it was kind of off to the races with Oni Press after that.
I was going to say that explains how you end up with Hopeless Savages as your first project, right?
Yeah, that was the first thing I did. Yeah.
You said that it took really until your senior year to like kind of buckle down and figure out that you really wanted to do this. Did you go, for listeners that don't know, SCAD is the Savannah College of Art and Design. Did you go there knowing you wanted to draw comics?
Yeah, I went there in the sequential art program, which was like very bare bones back then. Like I know, in the years since then, it's like really exploded. But like at the time, it was just, you know, kind of still getting going and, just very not I don't know, not bad. I don't I have complicated feelings about like art school in general, but like it didn't give me the kick in the pants that I needed, I think. It was only when, the looming specter of graduation was like hanging over me where I was just like, "Oh my god," kind of scared straight, like I'm gonna be in the real world and I don't know how to do anything.
That was like your life equivalent of a deadline. It's like, uh-oh, I got to cram now. Got to get in there. I got the deadline.
Yeah, basically, because it's like, like I didn't have, like I'm sure most students don't like have a job just like lined up like right after graduation, and like there's no guidelines, there's no like really support like after you graduate, like, they would have kind of lectures or whatever in class being like, okay, like here's what you're supposed to do to get a job, like after you graduate, but it's like it doesn't really mean anything. It's never as simple as like they make it out to seem. So that was scary enough to get me to be like to like really take a hard look at like where I was in life, like my skill level in terms of like art, and just stuff like that, and just like really kind of make a choice. And I feel like even though I majored in sequential art, there was still a part of me that like kind of just like did it because I didn't know like what else to do.
Mm-hmm.
And like I was like, well, I don't really know like what else I'm good at, really. So like, I'll just do, major in comics, I guess. I guess part of me like wishes I could go back in time and tell my younger self to like major in, I don't know, illustration or even like business. So I would have like a plan B thing where I could like have other skills.
I remember, so I went to school for marketing, which is at that point was the most common major you could possibly have, I think, in terms of the entire nation. And I think the main reason why I took it was because like I just didn't know what to do, I remember there was like this moment where I like called my mom from college and I was like crying because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. What should I do? And I figured if I did marketing, I could do like kind of anything. And like I wanted to be a writer, but I was like, I don't know if I need to like get a major in that to do that. And I don't know. I think it's kind of like a rite of passage to go through college and have this like existential crisis where you're like, I don't really know what I want. But I'm curious, you went knowing you wanted to draw comics. You were reading Calvin and Hobbes. I mean, early on, the Calvin and Hobbes and the Mirage TMNT were like two of the big draws for you. Were you drawing your own comics before you even made it to SCAD?
Yeah, just like little strips and stuff, kind of like, Calvin and Hobbes, like comic strips, Sunday funnies kind of stuff. Nothing really substantial beyond that. Not that Calvin and Hobbes is not substantial, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah. You weren't making any magnum opuses. It was more like trying to do your own like gag strips to the things that
Right.
you loved already.
Yeah, and since I had like no like concept of like, comedic timing or like jokes or anything, like I just, they were just kind of just nonsense, nonsense comics.
I don't know if that's changed. I will say you actually do have comedic timing, at least in your comics. Maybe that's a skill you've developed over the years, but you got it now.
Yeah, thank you. Like as a child, it's like you don't like. I'm sure, like maybe there's I don't know some child out there who's just like hilarious. Maybe I don't know. Like a lot of those Calvin and Hobbes strips, like I love the art and stuff. I didn't fully appreciate like the jokes or like the gags or like why a strip is like 4 panels, for example, and stuff like that. So I think at the time, like I would just be like, okay, well, it ends here, and Calvin says this thing, so I guess it must be funny because that's the end. And I would just kind of like copy it without like understanding the joke. Yeah, and that's kind of like what I was doing at the time.
I mean, I think that's one of the amazing things about, I mean, comic strips, I think, are particularly good about this. I grew up, Calvin and Hobbes was one of my big things, but then also I love Bloom County by Berkeley Breed, or Breathed, I guess it is. I loved it because it was about this like penguin guy and this crazy cat, Bill the cat, and all this stuff like that. And then like I remember looking through it like 20 years later and I was like, I cannot believe I was reading this. This is like about like weird political stuff in the 80s. There's no way I understood like half of it. I think this is true of everything, but in comics in particular, I kind of feel like there's a part of me that appreciated comics for like, does this comic have Transformers in it? Yes, then I love it when I was a kid. But now I can read certain things and I appreciate it in a completely different way than I did then.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and there's a lot of stuff that, I liked as a kid, and then reading it now, it's like I appreciate it way more because like I get it, like even those old Ninja Turtles comics where I was like, "Oh, okay. Now I see what they're doing there." That kind of thing.
I remember after watching the first movie, I found a bunch of the comic Eastman and Laird comics, and I remember just being like, "This is so different than the movie. There's a lot less pizza in this. What is happening here?"
Yeah, I was like, like so many kids, like, I was introduced to it through like the cartoon and the toys mostly.
Hmm.
A friend of mine had the 1985 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness tabletop role playing game by Palladium Books, and it
Nice.
was like the first licensed thing that Kevin and Peter like ever did, and they did all the art for it and everything, and so it was like pre toy, like pre cartoon, and it was just the turtles with like the red masks and like they look like much more intense or whatever. And I remember seeing that and being like, what are these turtles? What's going on here? What? And that led me to like, seeking out the comics, and I pretty much like renounced the cartoon
Yeah.
and stuff like after that. And I was this like, insufferable like 10-year-old turtle purist. This is like, I don't like them unless they're stabbing people.
They
So
shouldn't all have different colored what do you even call those things? I don't even know
just
what is
masks, I
mask,
guess.
I guess. Yeah. I was like, I feel like it's half headband, half mask. It's an
Yeah,
eye
well,
band.
some people call them bandanas, but they're not really bandanas.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Next time when you was it Friday when you have the next call, you need to ask what's the official terminology for it. We can spread the word.
Yeah, I always say mask because, like, it's like a robber mask.
Yeah. So you were pounding the pavement. You met Jamie S. Rich. You got that Hopeless Savages job. I know you worked with some writers early on, but one of the things I think is interesting about your career is a lot of people, especially in that period, it feels like a lot of people were not really like starting out doing writer artist stuff where they're doing everything on the book. But you had a lot of your work came in the form of books like Wet Moon, The Abandoned, Water Baby, and then eventually Shadow Eyes, which I think was 2010. And those were comics you wrote and drew yourself. When you got into that crunch and you're figuring out who I want to be in terms of a comic creator, did you see yourself as a writer artist rather than an artist alone?
Yeah, definitely. Because I remember I did in like in the final class that I took, we had to do this like thesis project, and I did like a 20 or 30 page kind of like proto Wet Moon thing, and I did everything on it, and I was just like, this is what I want. And at that time, I hadn't ever drawn anybody else's script, so I guess I had like no concept of doing that. But I felt at the time like I was like, this is something,
Mm-hmm.
doing the whole thing myself.
Yeah. I mean, it did make me wonder a little bit about how much of an influence. I mean, Eastman and Laird obviously are two different people, but TMNT, I think one of the things that really stood out to it was like, I mean, it was part of that black and white boom in the 80s. It was part of that. But also it was such a singular work that kind of felt like it almost, I think Kieran Gillen would call it the faux cartoonist. It kind of felt like it came from one person. And then, I mean, obviously Calvin and Hobbes, Bill Watterson, it's like no one could, if somebody tried to do Calvin and Hobbes, I think the world would revolt because it's just like, you can't, it has to be Bill Watterson. Do you think that part of the reason why you felt like, I don't know, obviously you want to tell your own stories, but it seemed like a lot of the stuff you connected with was really original, almost kind of pure creator driven stuff from the start.
Yeah, like another big one was like along those same lines was like the original Crow book by James O'Barr.
Oh yeah.
And like there was just something about that kind of like, I hesitate to say like, auteur or something, because like you said, like Kevin and Peter are two different people, and like they had other creators kind of like work with them, like Jim Lawson and Dan Berger and stuff. But like I think maybe like the key element is more that it feels like nobody is telling them what to do.
Yeah, I can see
You
that.
know? Like, whether it's, like, one person or, like, 2 people or whatever, like, Calvin Hobbes, The Crow, those, early Turtles books, it's like, it feels, I don't know, there's, like, a purity to it, like, for lack of a better term.
The James O'Barr stuff for The Crow, I do this column with creators where I'll interview them about the comics that made them, like the early ones that really inspired them. And Cliff Chiang picked the Crow, and that stuff is so raw. It is like so unfiltered, and like no one else could have done that. And certainly no one would tell someone to do something like that. And like I could see why that it's almost less about like the idea of roles and it's more about like the purity of intent and spirit.
Yes, yeah, just, like, the energy in it, and, like, like, maybe it's kind of a small thing, but, like, they would, like, do their own lettering, or, they would have, like, in Kevin and Peter's case, like, they would have, like, their friend Steve Levine, like, do the lettering, and it was, like, I don't know, it just has this, like, really, like, personal, kind of raw feeling,
Mhm.
which
I do think looking at your career, there's like this fascinating mix early on. It's like graphic novel where you're the artist, graphic novel writer artist, graphic novel writer artist, graphic novel artist, covers for a Mirage miniseries starring Raphael from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, graphic novel for writer artist, graphic novel.
right.
Yeah. And it's really funny looking at that because it feels like such an anomaly, but then it also kind of feels like it was an enormously consequential moment in your career. I don't know. I mean, this might be hard to say because it's been a part of your life for so long, but how did Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles end up kind of almost becoming like this for hire home for you I was going to say for so long, but it still is.
So, in the early 2000s, when Peter Laird and Jim Lawson started doing volume 4 of the Mirage Turtles, like, Kevin wasn't involved anymore at that point. So there was, like, the kind of, like, new flagship Turtles book coming out from Mirage, and Tales of the TMNT Volume 2 was the other one, and I can't remember who I talked to, but they were just like, "Oh, like, you should just email Steve Murphy," who was doing, like brand management stuff for Mirage, and he had written, like, some of the earlier Tales of the TMNT issues, and he was, like, friends with Peter and Kevin, and I can't even remember how I got Steve Murphy's email, but somehow I got it, and I just, like, cold emailed him, like, on Hotmail or whatever, like, I was like, Yeah, I have nothing to lose, like, who cares?" And I was just like, "Hey, I'm a big Turtles fan, and, like, I do comics professionally, like, I would love to work on something." And then, I got the cover gig for that Bad Moon Rising thing, and, I did a couple other pieces for them, and there was a point where I was gonna, like, write and draw, like, a whole issue, but it fell through because of the, Viacom sale.
Mhm.
I was going to do like, that kind of spun out into getting the job to do a new Turtles book at Dark Horse, because they were gonna get the license at first, right? So I was, like, involved with that, like, we hardly it all happened so fast, so there was, like, nothing there was, like, never any art or, like, anything there was, like, nothing concrete about it, and then IDW got the license instead at, like, the last minute or whatever, and I made a stink about it on Twitter. I was like, "That was my book. That was my Turtles book," 'cause I wasn't involved, And I think, like, the combination of that and the fact that I had done, like, a small amount of Mirage stuff kind of, like, put me on their radar, and then, they eventually approached me to do stuff, and, it's kind of crazy that, like, that was in 2011 or 2012, something like that, and I've just, like, been there ever since, off and on. I genuinely love working on that stuff, on the turtle stuff, like, I know there's a lot of, readers who don't like what I do on Turtles, but I feel like on some level I was, like, born to work on that stuff.
I got to give you a lot of credit. So every year I do this basically a top 20 countdown of favorite comics with my buddy Brandon Burpee. And every year, like, I don't know, probably like, we've been doing it since 2015. TMNT is in his picks. Like when it was like Tom Walton and like Mateus Santaloco, yes. When it's you, yes, et cetera, et cetera. And he really raved about your stuff. And I haven't read TMNT since the original like Red Masks. Since the Red Mask, I hadn't read any TMNT stuff. But when I was prepping for this, I started reading what started with issue 101 through Hoopla. And I have to say, you do an amazing job of walking the line between being new reader friendly and like keeping longtime readers engaged. The fact that you can really impress my friend who is about as hardcore of a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fan as you can find, and me, somebody whose like dominant vision is like them going to a place and fighting people while Vanilla Ice is performing, you know, that's a tough line to walk. You do a really good job. So great job by you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You know, before we get into Supergirl, I just want to do a kind of rundown of larger career questions. I'm going to leave these like bigger picture and let you kind of pick and choose. To start with, which of your projects from your career do you think you learned the most from, at least so far?
I was gonna say Turtles, but I feel like maybe Gem and the Holograms.
Yeah.
I feel like that was my first exposure to like angry fans.
Oh.
Because there was like a contingent of Gem fans who did not like me, did not like Kelly Thompson who wrote it, you know, hated my like redesigns of the characters and stuff. And like I think some of the meanest stuff that has ever been said to me was from angry Gem and the Holograms fans.
I'm not gonna lie, I didn't realize Gem and the Holograms had that intensive fans.
I think part of it is the fact that like, you know, there's like, you know, like Turtles, Batman, like these other kind of like, you know, like franchise IPs that get kind of reinvented,
Yeah.
like over and over and over again. Like Gem had never had that. It was all
yeah.
just the cartoon, just the dolls. Like we even beat the live action movie by like however many months, you know. And so like the comic, that was like the first experience that like these Gem fans who had, you know, who had been waiting for Gem to come back for decades, right? And then this comic comes out and they're like, well, what is this bullshit? like Stormer's fat? Like what the fuck is this? You know, it's like, yeah, it wasn't the characters that they had been waiting for to come back, to return or whatever, you know. And I feel like with not that Turtles fans or, you know, Marvel fans or whoever, like not that they don't like also get upset when like a new thing comes out, you know, like, you know, every new Turtles movie that comes out, like there's somebody who's just like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
It's ruined, you know, it's ruined the Turtles forever. Whereas like I feel like most of the fans are like, well, you know, I don't like this. Well, we'll kind of just have to wait for like another 5 years and there's going to be another version coming out, right? With like a new look, a new design and so forth. And, you know, maybe the Gem fans, they just didn't, they weren't used to that.
They probably didn't expect another one to be coming in 5 years. They're like, this is our one shot.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. Like that too. Like, this is it. This is all we get. And it's this stupid cartoony garbage.
What did you learn from that? Was it just about like kind of managing fans, or was it about like how you need to approach things when you know people are going to respond? What was the big thing you learned there?
I think just like not internalizing the stuff that they were saying to me. It's not like really about me personally, like as a person. It's fine if somebody doesn't like what I'm doing. And you know, you can't win them all. And I just had to follow my heart, like at the risk of being cheesy. And if I was like having fun with like what I was doing, then like that's all that matters. And it doesn't matter if, you know, fans like think it's like the worst thing ever, you know, like there's nothing I can do about that. And, you know, I can just do, you know, all I can do is do my best and do what I think is cool and try to ignore the haters, I guess.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. Oni Press presents a monstrous new milestone in the immortal legacy of the one and only EC Comics with Blood Type #1 this June. Crawling out of the pages of EC's best-selling anthology, Epitaphs from the Abyss, Hugo Award-nominated writer Karina Becco and superstar artist Andrea Sorrentino are biting deep for EC's first ever standalone horror series. Meet Ada, an immortal vampire who's just washed ashore on a tropical island paradise, teeming with wealthy tourists and superstitious locals. The perfect getaway for a cunning bloodsucker with nothing left to lose. But as Ada stalks the boundaries of her new hunting ground, she'll soon become embroiled in a deadly game of cat and mouse by moonlight as an older, wiser, and entirely different kind of monster reveals that this island is already spoken for. Pre-order with your local comics retailer by May 19th and look for Blood Type #1 in comic shops everywhere, June 11th, only from Oni Press and EC Comics. And now, back to the show. I kind of feel like, especially when it comes to like the different properties and everything like that, I feel like some of the least successful stuff is the stuff that aims for what they think people want already. And I mean, the interesting thing is like, I was going to ask you which project do you think like changed how you're reviewed in comics the most? And I kind of feel like, just as an outsider, I feel like that Gem book established, I feel like it changed how people viewed you. Kelly for sure. And then like Jen Bartel kind of came up with that too. And that was like a really consequential book in a lot of ways that I don't think many people would have been like, this Gem of the Holograms book is going to be this really big moment for the next 10 years in comics. And it kind of was.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, like Jen, she like really popped off after that.
Yeah.
So did Kelly. You know, there's plenty of projects where like I kind of look back on it and just be like, ugh, that sucked. Or like, I hated working on that. But yeah, Gem was one of the ones where I'm just like, that came out pretty good, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to ask about your kind of, you know, one of the things that's been interesting is you've done more writing for yourself on like these properties as well. But then you've also, you know, you're currently writing Mothra, Queen of the Monsters with, was it Matt Frank? I think it is. Yeah. Yeah. And near as I can tell, I tried really hard to figure out what the answer to this is. The first thing you wrote was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Universe #9 with your co-writer, Bobby Curnow. And I may be wrong about that. But do you think that starting to write for other artists has affected how you approach your own art and storytelling at all now that you see how other people are interpreting your scripts? Or do you think it's less that and more just like you're learning about writing?
I think you're right that was the first time I wrote for like another artist. In that case, being Pablo Tunica.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty sure. I think so. I think that was even because like I think Bobby was co-writer because we were kind of just like, you know, like, oh, can I handle this? I don't know.
Was he an editor at that time?
Yeah, he was the editor, and he like worked on the story, and just, you know, kind of like, you know, pushing it through. Like, is this gonna get through with just Sophie on writing duties? Like, is she ready for this? I don't know. I don't know if writing for other artists has really like changed anything in how I write in general, but I think it's more kind of like just interesting how I can kind of take like, you know, like I can write a script and see it in my head like what I would do.
Right.
Right. And then the pages come in from the artist and it's just like, whoa, I didn't even think about doing that. Like that's completely different. And yeah, it's just interesting to see like how somebody can take something that seems obvious to me and then do something that surprises me and is completely different than what I expected. And it's also different like when I have to like when I write for myself, it's my scripts are like really bare bones because like I know what it's gonna look like. So I'll just, you know, I'll be like, panel 1, a house, you know, like like that because I know what it's gonna be.
I know the house, just trust me.
Right. And so when I write for other people, it's like I can't do that. I have to have like, you know, I don't want to tell them how to do their job, but it needs like a little more.
You have to know what that house looks like in very specific.
Yeah, or just like I can't just write like, you know, close up on character X. Like it needs to be close up on character X. They look sad or something like that, you know, to give some context and what the story is supposed to be.
That totally makes sense. I always find it really interesting. I know a lot of artists who have kind of gotten into writing as well. And it is like, I've always wondered how it feels because like, it's like you'll hear writers say things like if you give 10 artists the same page of a script, they'll get 10 different pages and like 10 different interpretations of that. But the thing that when you're an artist also, you go in, I don't want to say baggage. I don't think baggage is the right word, but you go in with the expectation of this is how I would do it. And it kind of feels like It's not like you're gonna like look at something that like Matt comes up with for the Mothra book and be like, this is wrong. But there's a part of you, it's just like, I wouldn't have done it like that, but that's interesting. I just find that fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I can't think of like, I think nowadays in my career too, like I'm not like I'm much less precious about stuff,
Sure.
So like I'm never just like, oh well, I probably could have done a better job on that. Yeah, whatever. Like it doesn't not that Matt, if you're listening to this, not that I'm saying I could have done a better job, but yeah, it's like I want the artist to just do their thing.
Hmm.
Just go wild, do your thing, and like even like what I would do, it's like not even a factor anymore at that point.
I mean, so much. I mean, going back to SCAD for you too, as you progress throughout your career and doing all this stuff, everything you do is like putting in reps in very specific things. It's like, it seems like part of the reason why Gem, I mean, you said this yourself, like Gem was really important because you put in reps in something you wouldn't think you would need to put in reps with, which is like dealing with really harsh feedback. And it seems to me that like everything you do is like putting in a rep on something that you can like kind of eventually enhance your skills with. I do want to say I was rereading some of Glory in prep for this, and I just want to say like kudos to you. I know you did like the Wet Moon 20th anniversary edition, like where you had to look back on your work, and like I've talked to artists who are like, I don't like my work from last week, and you had to like look back for that. But it is interesting to see like Glory to like TMNT to like the first issue of Supergirl and just see how much you've changed as an artist. You've put in so many reps that like you've evolved in a lot of ways, probably in ways you can't even speak to.
Yeah, I mean, I think like even just doing like, my own stuff and like doing those earlier Wet Moon books, like, every volume, like something would change, like my art would change in some way, or I would like change my mind, like, I'm gonna draw it this way, or like look back, or like something I don't realize is changing in the moment, but then I'll look back on it and be like, whoa, like my art like really changed over the course of this book, or however, or like this year or whatever. I'm definitely one of those artists where I'll look back at, stuff I did like a month ago and just be like, "Ew, like why did I draw it like that? Like why did I draw that face that way?" But I think that's good. Like I don't want it to always be the same.
Yeah.
And I think like I don't know, sometimes I feel like I'm like plateauing a little bit where I'm like the changes don't seem as pronounced as they once were. But maybe that's normal, like a lot of those like big changes were happening when I was like, in my 20s and stuff, where it's like you're kind of figuring out, who you are, like what kind of work you want to do. And like there's definitely artists who kind of seem to, you know, spring forth like fully formed somehow, and like they're just like incredible and like yeah, like fully formed or whatever, like right off the bat. And I definitely wasn't. I'm not like one of those artists. Like even though I sometimes wish I was.
I think sometimes the improvement too is like almost imperceptible to like readers. It's just like very small things. Let's talk about Supergirl now. I do want to ask one thing about the art in specific. I'm going to give a spiel on the solicit here in a second, but one of the things I think is interesting, this might just be because the way Tamra Bonvillain is coloring you, but it kind of feels like your art style on this is like a little cleaner than it was in the past. Like a little, like it feels like a little tighter than you were before. You're going to draw TMNT differently than you're going to draw Shadow Eyes. And you're going to draw Shadow Eyes way differently than you're going to draw Supergirl. Is sometimes like the changes in your art less about you and more about the project?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, Shadow Eyes is all digital and I'll use like, different brushes or whatever. Like, and Shadow Eyes is done with like the basic, the basic aliased pencil tool or whatever in Photoshop, where it's just like kind of like shitty and chunky. And like that, like, in itself kind of like makes it look different and makes me draw differently. Whereas, if I'm doing something in, traditional media, like it's just going to look different and it kind of automatically puts me in like a different headspace. And with like Supergirl, like I'm like, I want it to be kind of like light and airy. And so, yeah, this like, that's how I'm going to do it. Like, I'm going to do it with this kind of kind of smoothness to it that like I wouldn't do if I was like, drawing turtles again or something.
Very quick aside, I think this is the best hair of your career. You draw some
Oh,
really good hair in this issue.
thank you. I appreciate that. That means a lot.
Are you drawing this traditionally?
No, this is digital.
Okay. All right. Now I'm going to give the spiel. So Supergirl is your upcoming series at DC Comics that you're writing and drawing with colors by Tamra Bonvillain. It debuts with the first issue on May 14th. Here's the solicit. Kara Zor-El has been a key member of the super family in Metropolis, but what happens when she strikes out on her own? Follow Kara as she returns to her roots in Midvale, home of Supergirl. But how could this be? Our hero has not been back in years, and the protector of that town has been saving the day for weeks. Can Supergirl stop the imposter before they steal her fresh start in life? I like that you laughed at my dramatic turn. It's the way the solicit's written. I gotta deliver it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I read the first issue and it's absolutely delightful. It's funny, in a weird way, the very first line from Supergirl where she's just like, nah, I was in just right off the bat. Just the nah got me. It is a great first issue. I do want to start with how it came together. I know you've done work for DC before. I think was it Batman Black and White that you did something for before?
Yeah, I did a thing in Batman Black and White and Superman Red and Blue.
So you had worked with them before, but writing and drawing a ongoing series is fairly unusual for either of the big two. So this is quite the turn. How did you first end up working on this book?
They approached me like late last year, and I had been working on a thing for Marvel like all summer, and they pulled the plug on it, and like like I was kind of left in the lurch, and I was just like fuck, like what am I gonna do? Like I don't have any money. Like I thought I was gonna have this big Marvel job, and now I don't, and I'm poor, and I'm broke. And then it was kind of like DC, they swooped in, and like rescued me at the last minute before I was gonna have to like get a day job or something. Not that there's anything wrong with day jobs, but you know what I mean. And I was just like, yes, I am interested. Sign me up. I'm ready. And like that was pretty much it.
Did you have any personal affinity for the character going in?
I'd read some of the old stuff, mostly like old Superman comics, and I was a big fan of the CW show.
Yeah. I do think one of the things that's really interesting of it, I don't really have a lot of Supergirl background to it, to myself either, but I think the thing that's interesting is like reading it. So there's like secret identities, like a really big focus is on her being Linda Danvers again, like going back to Midvale and all of that. And then there's like, it's a small town. There's, much to my delight, not one, not two, but three animal sidekicks in this book. And then when I think about that, and I think about like your cover to number 2 is like delightfully old school in a very specific way. And then you also use thought bubbles in this series. It's all these things that they kind of don't really do in superhero comics anymore. They come to you, they say, we want you for this. Was your pitch kind of going for more of a classic feel in some ways?
It was, I'm trying to remember like how it went, because they sent me like a whole bunch of stuff to read, and like I read, Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow by Bill Quist, Evely, and Tom King, and like I read, like a bunch of the old stuff, and I still have like I have this old like Superman collection. It has like this like leather red cover from like 1971, and my dad had this book when I was little or whatever. So like, and Supergirl would kind of appear in various Superman comics back then. So, like I was familiar with like that kind of Silver Age feel. And
Right.
that was kind of the first, I was just like, yeah, it would be really fun to do that kind of thing. And then after I read Woman of Tomorrow, which is like really great, and it's like really, I don't know, serious, I guess, quote unquote, and it's very like it feels like very important
Right.
or something. And I was just like, oh, like I'm not Tom King.
You want to go lighter?
Yeah, I'm never gonna like, I've done some like dark, like brutal stuff in my career or whatever, but like I don't know if I'm ever gonna have like something similar to say about like these kinds of characters. Like I just don't know like what I would do and like what I have to like say about these characters really, that aren't mine.
Mm-hmm.
Like Turtles is one thing, like I grew up with that stuff, and like I had been, honing my vision of Ninja Turtles like my whole life.
Yeah.
then with Supergirl, it's just like, yeah, like I love this character, and I've drawn like fan art and stuff over the years, but like I just don't know if I have anything like important to say. So I think I should just do the opposite. I should do the opposite of what Tom King would do.
Yeah.
And like, and just like it should be like these old Silver Age comics where like, like almost every panel is just like, wait, what? Like it's just like bananas. And there's this like sincerity to it that I really love, and this kind of like freewheeling feeling to it where it's like it's still, like it's not a joke. Like, it's not meant to be silly or whatever, but yeah, it's just crazy. And all the characters kind of like they don't like question it. And it's just yeah, I'm having like a hard time like even explaining like those old comics.
Oh no, I totally know what you're saying. I think one of the other things it does is kind of like those old comics too is it's kind of a dense comic. There's a lot to it. I mean, it like starts with, I don't want to spoil it, but starts with like a big bad, there's a villain in the beginning, settling that out. There's some Candor action. There's like sorting out like, there's, like I said, multiple animal sidekicks, including, and I have to say, of all the things you drew in the book, your streaky drawing with wrapped around Candor is like maybe the best drawing in the entire issue. But there's just like a lot that happens in it. And it actually, this is an odd word to describe a comic with. It felt kind of refreshing. It was like a contrast to a lot of the stuff that I read these days when it comes to superhero comics. And it felt like light but meaningful is like maybe that's the sweet spot you're going for. It's like it's not like it's so opposite Tom King that it doesn't have importance, but you handle it with like a smile on your face in a way.
Like I don't want it to be like disposable, I guess. Like like, I think having, like there's going to be like some emotion or heart there just like because like that's how I do it, and it's be there regardless, I think. Yeah, like I don't want it to be like flippant, I guess.
Sure, sure.
But at the same time, like I'm trying to like challenge myself because like I feel like my normal mode is kind of like really decompressed, kind of slice of life stuff. But this is like like okay, like we have 20 pages, and like I can't do like a complete Silver Age, Bronze Age throwback. Like I can't do that because it's a different time. We have different kind of considerations, and like a lot of those older comics, they kind of have like a picture book in a way where it's like each panel has like a little kind of like narration thing where it's just like, and then Supergirl flies into the sky and uses a laser weapon that she'd already prepared. And then like the picture, like the panel is just her with like the laser gun with like no real connective tissue between like the previous panel. And it's like that would be really fun to do. It's not like totally me, we're not in like the, 50s or 60s anymore.
Right.
So, it's like I have to kind of do like my own thing at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, you said it wasn't really kind of like the slice of life. It wasn't decompressed in the same way. I do think that there are like hallmarks of that in there where it's like it really feels character centric in a way that like I think some of the best superhero stuff really does. It's kind of like a fusion of all of these things. It's like it's your preference, like you're kind of natural lean as a storyteller. It's got, kind of more modern art sensibilities. It's got the Silver Age kind of some level of story density without being like what you were saying. I think it's like a fusion of all those things in the best way. But I did want to ask, like, you've done a lot of things that have that slice of life angle to it, ignoring your current Mothra story, which in a lot of ways is about as not slice of lifey as possible. There's a lot more time travel and time loops and things like that in there than your average slice of life story has. But do you feel like that very character centric writing is your natural lean as a storyteller?
Yeah, for sure. Because I feel like if I can figure out like the main character or, characters plural, like I feel like it almost writes itself in a way where if I'm like, okay, so like, if I can understand like, Kara Zor-El and she, and then just kind of like put her in like, okay, she goes back to Midvale, her hometown, right? And there's like a Supergirl doppelganger who's like a thick super babe. It's like okay, like that writes itself. Like I know exactly what it's gonna be, right? And the character, I think, like for me, definitely comes first, and then plot kind of like you know fourth, or maybe.
Well, I mean, the plot comes from the characters.
Yeah, yeah. Or, sometimes I'll just have like, like what do I really want to draw? Like, I want to draw like sharks. I love sharks. And so like that's like as deep as like my plot writing will get. And then I'll be like, okay, so I'll figure out how to get the sharks or how to get Supergirl like with the sharks. I'll figure that out later kind of approach.
That's amazing. I mean, I feel like if you like what you're drawing and what you're writing, other, readers are going to like it more. And so if it takes sharks, if it takes animal sidekicks, if it takes all that, I have to admit, the only problem with the imposter storyline is their animal sidekick is so adorable that I'm actually kind of rooting for the imposter at this point.
I
So
know, right?
it's a real
Yeah, and
problem.
that was like that was a no-brainer. I was just like, well, she has to have her own super pet,
Yeah.
Candy the super rabbit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And there's gonna be in number 3, there's gonna be a 4th super pet,
Oh
but
my God.
I won't spoil it.
Super fans are eating well right now. I love it.
And like part of it too is I just like I get like distracted like really easily, and I get like I don't want to say bored, but like if I'm gonna be drawing like a long form book, like I can't like it has to have something that changes in every issue, or I'm gonna lose steam on it. Which was really great with Gem because in every issue they would have different outfits and different hair. Like that's enough. So like, like I would finish an issue and then just be like, "Oh god, I'm exhausted." Well, but in issue number 3 I get to draw the character with this haircut or this hairstyle, like this outfit I just came up with. And then that like that gets me more excited. And with Supergirl, like it's kind of like that where I'm just like, okay, oh, but the next issue I get to come up with this new super pet, or the next issue she's going to be wearing this costume, that kind of thing. Like,
Yeah.
oh, this villain's going to show up for one issue, that's enough to like keep me from losing steam.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. Launching this month on Zooper campaigns from Ron Mars with the late great Lee Motor for a deluxe edition of their Image Comics Shinku, as well as another special edition of Haunted Girl by Ethan Sachs and others. And there is still time to support campaigns by Stefan Rue, Edgardo Miranda Rodriguez, and more. And for those who are fans of Zenescope comics, Zoop Games and Zenescope have a live campaign for Grim Fairy Tales Unbound, the deck building game over on Kickstarter. For fans of trading cards, deck building games, and more, there are tons of exclusives for this campaign that you won't want to miss. Zoop would like to thank all the creators who have submitted projects and urge all creators to submit your project to Zoop. Click the Submit Your Project link at zoop.gg as they are providing services to even more creators than ever before. And now, back to the show. This reminds me of a quote I came across from you from a previous interview you did. And I think you were talking about Wet Moon, and somehow you got on the subject of talking about how you like drawing garbage.
Yes.
But I mean, the funny thing is like that drawing garbage details to like a room or environment, which I want to say, like, I kind of feel like you touch on with Kara's room, where you go into the room, there's stuff everywhere. And, but then also like the drawing all the costumes and everything like that. It seems like a lot of times it's like you kind of crave change as a storyteller, and maybe it's part fighting boredom, but maybe it's like that's how you find your joy in the work, is just the constant change.
Yes, I think yeah, like part of me like I wish I could like it's obviously like it's Supergirl, like or in the case of like Ninja Turtles too, like just like what if this character, like what if they get their arm chopped off and then they get like a bionic arm, just like even if it's stuff like that. Or
I liked in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles when he took the turtles to a metal show, and like that gave you the opportunity to be like, what would the turtles wear when they go to a metal show?
Yes, like different outfits and stuff. Like, I want it to be like, yeah, change is one thing. Like, obviously like I want like I always want there to be like little arcs of characters, like whether, their personality changes in some way, or if it's like a visual kind of, or like a visual change that like represents
Hmm.
that change. And um with like Supergirl, like, I wish I could just be like, what if Kara gets into like death metal, and then like that's what she's really into for a bit, and like that she starts like dressing like, like she's into metal now. Like, I can't do that because it's Supergirl, obviously, or
Slightly different restrictions on this, I'm guessing.
yeah, right, like absolutely. Like, there may or may not be some like, like goth stuff that shows up.
Nice.
I do what I can, but like obviously I can't have trying to think like what would I do if I could do anything? What if Kara grows a second head all of a sudden?
I will say one thing that you've really baked into the book that I think kind of fits what we're talking about is there's all these different versions of Kara in the book. You got hero version, you have the regular life version that's going to Midvale and like trying to be a part of that again. But then there's also like, I like the Candor stuff because there's like the responsibility of like, I have to do this and I have to go in there. And there's all these like kind of, there's like things that you're definitely alluding to that could come back later. And it's almost like each issue could have different versions of the character that are part of the same show up from issue to issue. And I think that's pretty fantastic. You've given yourself a lot of options, even just in the first issue.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, like in issue 2, like, I don't, I can't spoil it or whatever, but like, that box of old costumes that she discovers on the side of the road, like that might come back, you know, and stuff like that. And like, even like there's a part in number 2 where I draw her in this like she's not in her like Linda Danvers identity, but she just has this like yoga leisure outfit on, and like that's enough for me to like get excited about a scene. And like what can I say about the character with just like this different outfit that they put on, or like how they do their hair when they're in like casual mode. It's not like it's not like a plot point, but you can kind of say something about the character in this kind of like small, subtle way.
Well, I mean, I think that's the thing that's really interesting. I mean, we kind of talked about this to some degree earlier on, but I feel like the things that you value as a storyteller are going to be different than what readers do. But it's like, I think that you valuing that is going to make it more important. Like, I mean, I talked about the hair thing. I bet you could probably do 20 different interviews and no one else is going to mention hair, but like, you draw gray hair and like super pets. I'm all about it. Everyone else, maybe they're going to be all about like the superhero stuff, but every reader is going to have something different that speaks to. So you kind of following whatever feels right is probably going to result in you speaking to more readers. But I will say, I didn't realize, is it canonical that there's like a hollow tree hiding spots? Because
Oh my God, yes.
is that a real thing? I love it.
Okay, that's gonna come back.
I bet.
Oh my God, I don't know if this is spoilers or not, but there is this old issue. So, okay, so in the Silver Age, when Kara's at the Midvale orphanage, right? She had, I guess this isn't like really spoilers because it happened like, back in the 50s or whatever.
Yeah.
She had Linda robots that
Oh
would
my
like
God.
take her place when she's off doing Supergirl stuff, right? She runs off to do superheroics, and she has like a Linda robot duplicate at the orphanage, so like no one suspects anything, right? And then there's this later issue where she finally gets adopted by the Danverses, and so she's like, well, I guess I don't need I don't need these robots anymore. And so there's this panel. I should just send you the panel. It's so great. So like she's like turning around, she's like waving to this robot who's like going into this hollow tree with this like door that opens.
Oh my God.
And she's like, sorry, Linda robot, but I don't need you anymore. And the robot is just like, that's okay. I'll wait here in this hollow tree until you need me again.
So
And like
somewhere in Midvale, there's just a
that's it
robot just hanging out
for
in a
that
tree.
robot. So I'm just like, going to my editor. I'm just like, has this ever been followed up on? because there's like a fucking robot like waiting in that tree for Kara to come back.
Chekhov's tree robot. I love it.
Yeah, and so that secret tree hiding spot is alluding that there may be other trees with other secret doors in them.
I'm so into that. I love it. Why
Mhm.
is it that in this Silver Age they gave everybody robots? Everybody had robots.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer when you think about it because it's like all those characters, they have secret identities and like what's the best way to throw people off the scent of, discovering who you are? It's like, yeah, just have like a doppelganger, like take your place, and then nobody's the wiser, and like nobody's ever gonna question it. So like, of course they would have robots that look like themselves. It makes sense.
I would have a robot that looked like
Yeah,
myself if I could.
I know.
I would be all about that. That'd be amazing. I do want to ask about Tamra's colors. Tamra's one of the best. Absolutely one
Yeah,
of
I
the
love
best.
Tamra. She is great.
She compliments you very well in this book. Have you worked with Tamra before?
No, but like, we're good friends. We're very close, and like as soon as I got Supergirl, I was just like, yeah, I'm just gonna ask Tamra to color it.
Yeah. How do you think she brings the best out of your work?
I mean, like I know the kind of stuff that Tamra likes to color, and I think it's like I'm never gonna give Tamra any notes.
Hmm.
I think that, she enjoys that because it like kind of frees her in a way where I'm not gonna be like, after the fact, be like, hey, can you color this green instead? Or whatever. It's free as air. Whatever she wants to do, she can do it.
Yeah. She just does such a good job. It's really amazing seeing what she does on your work, and it really complements your style in this book really well. But last question about this book is you're writing and drawing. Writing and drawing is a lot. I mean, writing is a lot. Drawing is even more. And I mean, there's like the physical part of drawing. I think people sleep on that part. Like the physical act of drawing is a lot. And I think one of the things is like this is naturally going to be like a big draw for a lot of readers is you doing both. Are you working with your editors to try to like build in like breaks for you along the way to make sure you can try to maximize as much as you can on the book?
Yeah, so, like, there's invariably gonna be, like, fill-in issues here and there. I'm trying I'm trying to save all the best stuff for the issues that I draw,
Everything involving a tree, please.
right? Like, anything with Tree or, uh, Candy the Super Rabbit. Um, but yeah, there's gonna be fill-in issues, like, I'm not Hayden Sherman, I'm not Dan Mora, like, I can't some people can draw, like, 3 books at once somehow, and
Hayden drew an issue while we've been talking.
I know, yeah, it's ridiculous. Just like, I gotta go take a dump, I'll draw, like, 8 pages while I'm on the can. It's crazy. Yeah, it's like, even when I was, like, at my freshest and, like, when I used to think of myself, like, as a machine, like, back in the day. But, like, even back then, like, I don't think I could ever match that pace. It's like it's mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
And as much as I would love to draw, like, everything myself,
It's just not reasonable.
I have to be realistic about it, and sometimes I needed to take a nap.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think DC's done a really good job of like building in breaks for artists on their books currently, but also finding good stylistic matches. I don't know if you know who will be the person who guests for you, but I imagine it'll be a good choice.
Yeah, and, there's also definitely, like, something fun about that, like, it's always fun, like, like we were talking about earlier, like, seeing what a different artist, like, comes up with, or just, like, I love this is going back to, Matt on, Mothra, it's like, I love, like, being surprised, like, getting the pages, like, in the email or whatever, and just be like, "Oh, that's, like, 10 times better than what I was thinking."
Did you wait? So, I do want to very briefly talk about you're doing Mothra, Queen of the Monsters with Matt Frank, and you actually got to create a new kaiju with this, which I think is
Oh,
absolutely fantastic. Antra, which is
oh,
an ant. What I'm kind of astonished that there wasn't, at least to my knowledge, an ant kaiju before. But
no.
you did that together, right? You and Matt did. Did you kind of
Yeah,
design the character together?
yeah, it was in the early stages, that character was gonna be Batra. I don't know how familiar you are with those movies.
I do have it's not like a huge sign, but I do have a Godzilla -1 Super 7 giant figure right behind me.
Oh,
So,
nice.
yeah.
So Batra is like the dark Mothra, and so originally the villain was going to be him, and somewhere along the way we were, like there was something that we couldn't do with the character, so like, let's just make a different, let's just make a new one that doesn't have any like, like restrictions or whatever, because it's not like, like like a licensed, there's no considerations or whatever for the brand. And I was just like, well, it should obviously, I love ants, so it should obviously be an ant. And Mothra's name is just moth with Ra at the end, so it should just be Antra.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Matt and I like, went back and forth, like designing it with, like I would do a sketch, he would do a sketch, and we would kind of toss it back and forth.
Mothra is my favorite of all of the monsters. I absolutely love Mothra. And I don't remember ever seeing a larva version before, but somehow Matt draws the larva as being sassy, which I didn't realize was possible with a larva form.
Yeah, wait, you've never seen Mothra's larva?
I don't know how I've never seen it, or at least I don't remember. So when I was a kid, I live in Anchorage, Alaska, and when I was a kid, for some reason the library movie collection had all of the old like Toho movies, all of them, and so I've watched all of them like a million times. But for some reason, I didn't remember the larva version.
Yeah.
Well, spectacular work by Matt, regardless, in bringing that larva version to life.
Absolutely. Like in the old movies, the Mothra larva, she's like brown and she has these really like beady little eyes. And I wanted to have it be kind of, like a different, because it's a different Mothra. The larva should look different. And it should be like, how caterpillars are always like brightly colored and like kind of disgusting. It should just be bright and have these little arms.
I kind of feel like this project is in like the vein of TMNT for you, where it's like something you've been prepping your whole life for. I mean, you actually have like sculpted and designed kaiju figures for Max Toy Co., which is like pretty spectacular. The fact that you're like getting to work with kaiju just feels like something that just had to happen.
Yeah, it's crazy that it took as long as it did.
I'm glad it's happening because you're doing a really good job. But
thank you.
To close, I want to talk about some overarching stuff. You're writing and drawing Supergirl. You're currently writing Mothra, Queen of the Monsters, the miniseries we were just talking about. I don't know what else you have cooking up. You probably have other things, but I'm always curious as to like whether or not creators have a sense as to like what maximum busy looks like, because like writing and drawing a book is a lot. That's like 2 full-time jobs on top of each other. Plus you have another project. Do you have a sense as to like what capacity is for you at this point in your career?
I feel like right now is capacity.
Yeah.
There's definitely like a point that I get where I can feel myself getting stressed out, and so like I feel like I'm right below that. Like I don't feel stressed yet. And like, maybe as I, inevitably steadily fall behind on Supergirl deadlines, like I'll start getting stressed out. But for the most part right now, like I feel pretty, like I'm not like ready to keel over and die yet. So I think that's pretty good. Like I think the capacity thing is mostly like a mental thing. Like if I'm thinking about too many things,
Mm-hmm.
Like if I let myself start thinking about how like I still haven't finished Shadow Eyes or whatever, or my next like kaiju mini comic for like the next Max Toy figure, like then I start kind of like going crazy and being like, I just get like spread too thin and like I don't have the bandwidth for like anything, and I end up just like sitting here doing nothing. But like if I'm just focusing on like one thing at a time, then I feel like I can keep myself like below that like busyness capacity.
I mean, that's like the tough thing. So I have like a day job, and then I also have my comics work where I have the podcast and I have a site and everything like that. And sometimes when I feel like I'm thinking about the things I have to do for my day job and the stuff I have to do with my comic work, instead of doing any of it, I just do none of it. And it's like the worst. And it's just like, I don't know. Sometimes it's like thinking in totality is almost like harmful to your brain.
Yes. Yeah. Like absolutely. If I just, it's like, there's this old Simpsons episode where Mr. Burns like goes to the doctor and the doctor says something like, like Mr. Burns, like you have every disease in your body, but since there's so many of them and they have this little graphic of like a door or something,
I think I've seen this. Yeah.
like all the germs trying to get through the door, but since they're all trying to get through at once, like none of them can get through. And like that's what I always think about, where I'm just like, when I get to that point where like I just have like too much shit going on and none of it gets done because there's too many like unrelated disparate tasks that have to get done.
None of it can get through the door.
Yeah, nothing can get through the door, and I end up just watching Star Trek on the couch instead of like doing the work that I'm supposed to be doing.
Hey, sometimes you just gotta take that's the thing too. Is like I was talking to somebody who works in comics earlier, and they were telling me I don't harass people about how much sleep they get, but when there are people who message me at like 5 a.m, I'm like, you should get to sleep. This person was like, I've been sleeping 7 hours, and I was like, I am so happy for you. Sometimes you just gotta sleep. You just gotta watch Star Trek. You just gotta do whatever. Editors, please don't listen to me saying that, but it's still important. It's like you just gotta find a balance between all of it. And like sometimes that line can be difficult to walk. It's like your sweet spot is like you want to be maximum busy, but you don't want to get to that stressed point, it seems.
Yes. And I've been working in this business for, over 20 years, and I feel like I'm still trying to find like that work-life balance. It's always a struggle.
Last question I have for you. I wanted to bring up something that we kind of talked about a little bit earlier, which is like the different roles you've had. Earlier on, you did projects where you were just the artist. Near as I can tell, again, this is just me looking through way too many websites trying to diagnose what the answer was. The last comic you only did art for was either TMNT, Bebop and Rocksteady Destroy Everything #5 or Gem and the Holograms #16. I could be mistaken about that. Either way, it seems like it's been a bit since you've only drawn something. At this point in your career, I know your preference is to write and draw your own stuff. Is your preference to just write and draw your own work, or write, but only drawing a project is kind of a no-go?
There is actually one thing that I couldn't have done it based on the schedule, but I really wanted to work with Matt Bors on Toxic Avenger.
Oh, yeah.
Like, like that was like kind of like a bucket list comic where I was just like, yeah, I'm not writing it, but like, I love Matt, and I'm willing to do that. I would work with Kelly Thompson again. I think we make a pretty good team, and like, we've batted. Oh, I did that fill-in issue of Birds of Prey with Kelly.
Oh yeah, you did. Oh, I read that. I completely forgot. The one where they were going into the different yeah.
Cartoon world. Yeah, it wasn't the whole issue, but it was like 12.
It had like the framing device around it.
Right. Yeah. So I think that was the last thing I did with another writer.
I can't believe I totally spaced that.
I spaced on it too. Yeah, it was fun.
But I mean, it seems like it really kind of comes down to it would need to be a really special opportunity for you to want to go back in that direction.
Yeah, like it would either have to be something really special, or if I'm broke,
right?
And I don't have a choice.
I mean, that's the funny thing is like I always like to ask people like how they come up with what projects they want to do, and like really when it gets down to it, sometimes it's just like you got to pay the bills.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like that's gonna if you get a that actually going back, I asked you if like the only things you'd worked on for DC. I completely spaced the Birds of Prey book, but I mean like when those opportunities come up, it's like sometimes you just need that project that you would enjoy because you were working with Kelly, but also it helps do the important things you need in life to be a person who functions and lives in the world.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Like, like as kind of like, romantic the idea is of just like, being an artist and like, doing what inspires you, like that kind of thing. It's like, yeah, like a lot of the stuff, I do like if I didn't need to pay the bill, or, if I was just rich or whatever, like, I don't think I would do comics at all. Like I think I would just disappear. Like you'd never hear from me again, like I would just be, in my house making my kaiju figures.
Yeah.
And that's it. So on some level, I guess, like maybe it's bad to have comics as like your main moneymaker because it's comics. But, on some level, like, yeah, like that's, I have to think about, the financial aspect of it.
Absolutely. Well, I wish you nothing but the best, and I hope you get to the point where you just get to sit in your house and make kaiju figures, because I feel like that'd be spectacular. But that is all I have for you, Sophie. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about your career, Supergirl, kaiju figures, super pets, and everything else. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. It was fun.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with cartoonist Sophie Campbell. You can find her on Blue Sky and Instagram, and her work in Mothra, Queen of the Monsters, and the upcoming Supergirl. As per usual, big thanks to Deanna Chapman for editing this week's episode. Love Off Panel, want to support it? Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify today, and give the show a rating or review while you're at it, but 5 stars only. You can also support the show by backing it on Patreon. Find the show at patreon.com/offpanel, and when you back it on there, you get early access to each week's podcast as well as weekly content and more. Want even more? Subscribe to my subscription site, Sketched, at sketch.com for long-form articles, interviews, and the rest of the site's content. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by following on Blue Sky and Instagram, or following me on Blue Sky and Instagram. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including AC, Simon Birch, Austin, Scion, Megan Marsden, T.S. Luther, Comic Book Couples Counseling Podcast, Scott Carpenter, Gus, MK Frygeist, Saunter, Brian, Chris Robinson, David Byrne, Milton Lawson, Benjamin Wilkins, Chris Hacker, John Neesmith, John Auerbach, Dustin Weaver, Brandon Heyman, Aiden Hammond, Faith Aaron Hicks, Ben Rowe, Cameron Brown, Jonathan Breen, Charlie Stickney, Tom Drennan, Jeremy Thomas Burke, Jared Schwab, Scott Dunn, Chip Mosher, Seth Pomeroy, James McEwen, Andrew Lehman, Christina Merkler, Scott Place, Travis Gibb, Darcy Van Polges, Tom Evans, Reed Beeman, Kelly Sudaconic, Max Wood, Jeremy Lambert, Brian Near Levy, Jason Hussad, Kieran Gillen, Jonathan Kent Uratam, Henry Johnson, Dennis Hoffman, Jingo Boren, James Tynan IV, Chris Langford, Jason Wood, Tom Peachy, Ben Domstead, Rom V, Nick Walker, Petra Coyle, Isaac Oren, Klaus Vandeven, Submin Industries, Jack Mulqueen, Carl Kerschel, Rob Masella, Elza Chartier, Luke Nakashoji, Dr. Luke, Scott Hazelwood, Canadian by Proxy, Bradley Rader, Carl Troy, Brandon DePills, Patrick Power, Declan Shelby, Dan Carino, Adam Freeman, Ben Wild, Brian Klein Q, Liana Kingus, Nick Bennett, Susanna Puller, Reed Hinkley Barnes, Mario Tiambang, Robert Wilson IV, Andrew Carita, Stephen Hull, Philip Myra, Chris Pachello, Torrin Grunbeck, Fuzz Bubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Waltz Comics and Books, Akil Wilson, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Wesley Giff, Sean Kirkham, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Ryanwan, Vieta Ayala, Akil, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, David Kelly, Jason Massey, Adam Bogart, Matthew Taylor, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendrick, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Colin McMahon, Adam Highfield, Fiona Staples, Mark Abnett, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonakos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Wolfpack for letting me use their song Outro as the show's opening theme, and to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off Panel's outro and ad music just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.